For someone whose entire career has been focused on joy, why a podcast on pain? Because these stories need to be told. A good phoenix rising out of the ashes story reminds us all that not only can we survive, we can thrive. And when we emerge, we're different. That's the alchemy of pain. We're about 10 episodes into the Alchemy of Pain podcast, and at this juncture, I wanted to do an update for everyone. First of all, thank you for listening. This is certainly a labor of love for me. People have kind of looked at me with the side eye. This is not something you can monetize, and I think yet, but that's not the goal. The goal has been to shine a light on stories of people, real people, regular people, not stars or influencers or just regular people who have gone through some painful situations and made it through. Every person has a story, and every story is worth telling. And from a selfish perspective, I learn something from every person I talk to. And sometimes in the conversations, things come out of my mouth and I'm like, ooh, I didn't even realize that I thought that. In one recent conversation, I talked about the fact that, in episode 0, spoke of a season of pain, thinking it was over. And I think that's one of the greatest mistakes that we can make is think, okay, I'm done. The karma's paid. Let's get to the good part now. Surely enough, right? And then we're sucker punched and surprised when new stuff happens. So this is part of my learning process too. Since the Alchemy of Pain began as a podcast, one night I was driving home from dinner with friends, and out of nowhere, a car came careening across the median and straight for me. And in that moment, my only thought was, I guess that's how it ends for me. I thought I was going to die. I could not escape the impact, and I braced for it. And after the crash, I opened my eyes and realized I was still alive. I'm like, really, one more thing? But then the other thought was, oh my gosh, am I hurt? Like, I was numb. I didn't know exactly the implications of what had happened to me. I just sat in the car, stunned, saying to no one, help me, help me. I didn't know if anybody was going to come to help. And then this young man who was behind me through the whole thing, his car was next in line. He didn't have to, but he pulled over, he and his girlfriend, and came up to my window and said, are you all right? And I said, I don't know. I was afraid that the car was going to burst into flames. So I wanted to get out, but I couldn't do it myself. I mean, the car was crunched and totaled. He took both hands and helped ease me out of the vehicle, and he held onto my hands until the ambulance came. And he didn't just do that. He locked eyes and he said, now you're going to breathe with me, and you're going to look right at me, and I'm going to breathe with you, and we're going to be okay. Until the ambulance comes, you're not alone. I think about the angels that walk this earth, that are here at junctures in our life when we just don't know what we would do without them. I even tried to send him a letter after the fact and it came back undeliverable. I don't know who this person is. I know their name, but I don't know how to find them. But man, so I get to the ambulance and they didn't see any noticeable injuries. So they were like, do you want to just get an Uber home? I'm like, no, I, I'm in shock. So we get to the hospital, and this is the other thing. I never felt so alone in my life. My phone felt the crash and called my emergency contacts. One of my emergency contacts was all across the country in New Jersey. The other one, well, her phone was off. So there I was, me, myself, and I thought, okay, this sucks. And here I am facing it all alone. I couldn't move for like 3 days. And I have contusions and whiplash and the whole nine, physically recovering. Thank God, though. I mean, it could have been way worse. I have been told that many people don't walk away from accidents like that. So here I am. But then I was sort of wrestling with God again. Like, okay, so if I didn't get offed, what's the reason? Like, what's the purpose? Because here I am, sort of slogging away, doing what I believe is my purpose. And yet, is anything really sticking? Is anyone really out there? And if you are, by the way, let me know. It would be encouraging. And then doing it all by myself. It's not how I imagined my life to be. Well, my cousin and her husband showed up at the emergency room and they took me back to their house and I recovered for a few days. And, my whole new routine of going to the gym and just all my new healthy habits got sort of, because getting up out of a chair was painful. And then there was the driving thing. I still don't comfortably drive at night. There are these visceral memories in the cells of my body when I get into a vehicle and I feel that sense of, okay, I may be in control of my vehicle, but I can't control what comes at me. And isn't that such a metaphor for life? You can do everything that you know to do, and yet you can't control what comes at you, which is scary. I remember thinking out loud, this is a scary world. And we who are raised on, and they lived happily ever after, we wait for the happily ever after, thinking that there should be at least some point where it gets easy. And when you realize that it doesn't, or it's at least quite delayed, you can lose hope and heart. So I was spiraling, propping up all of my social media stuff and keeping my business running as best as I could. And then I get a note from my doctor that when I was at the emergency room, they had done a CAT scan to just make sure that there were no internal injuries, and they found nodes on my thyroid. And I'm like, I don't have time for that. I'm sure it's nothing. But because it's like, surely there couldn't be something else. Had to go and get an ultrasound to check it out. Well, those suckers were quote unquote suspicious. And my doctor said, you need a biopsy. Well, by this point, I was just, stick a fork in me. I'm done. I don't have any more capacity. I got nothing else. And just wouldn't this be a great 1-2 punch? to now have to deal with a diagnosis. And then I shifted into all my tools, the things that I know to do. And I started to say, look, I'm believing for the best. I'm believing for benign. But if, and you may have heard this interview that I did with Sonia Louise, and she talked about life being a bottomless pit, because if we are eternal beings, that we don't really hit bottom. We just keep going and going and going. So if there is no bottom, it's no risk of an end, which is small comfort when you feel like you're falling and you can't find your footing. However, when she said that, something in me rose up and I said, well, you know what? If this is a bottomless pit and I'm falling, I want to at least do cartwheels and acrobatics and have some fun along the way. Because I honestly couldn't remember the last time I had a really good time. Now, maybe there might have been a more spiritual way to handle all this, but there were a lot of days to wait before my biopsy. So let me talk about that for a minute too. Look, the only reason I'm sharing this is maybe some of you are going through yet another scary time. And I don't want you to think that, this podcast is, well, Brenda went through her tough time and woohoo, it's all good now, onward and upward. No, I'm facing stuff every day, just like all of you. But looking for the lessons in it all, not in this strain of toxic positivity that doesn't deal with the feelings of it all and is just looking on the bright side. No. I have eschewed that, and I definitely want to get what I'm supposed to get out of stuff, but feel all the feelings too, and not invalidate my feelings. I was pissed. I was angry. I was scared and vulnerable. And I didn't like, of all of them, I didn't like this feeling of vulnerability. So biopsy day was finally scheduled. That's half of the torment, the waiting. I had to wait 10 days to finally get the biopsy. And I'm like, okay, I've got this. I've got this. And then I woke up the day before sobbing. I'm like, what is wrong with you, Brenda? Come on, your head is in the game. You're going to go get the biopsy. I was going to Uber to the biopsy. And I realized more than the test itself or what the results might be, the thing that made me saddest was that I didn't have anybody to take me. Now, had I called my cousin and said, I absolutely need you to go with me, she absolutely would have. But in my mind, it's like, look, everybody's got a life. You don't want to be a burden or a problem to everyone. You just need to do what you need to do and make it happen. But I realized that it was just making the fear of the test worse by going it alone. And that's when I got the gift of this whole experience. I mean, I originally thought, okay, accident. Thankfully, I'm not gravely injured, but maybe I'll get a really good settlement. Not. Maybe one of the doctors assigned to me, a chiropractor or an orthopedic surgeon, or maybe someone is going to end up being my person and I'll live happily ever after. That didn't happen either. And I couldn't think of anything else good that could come of all this until this gripping sadness that I was going to have to hire someone to take me to a scary appointment. And I cried it out. And I realized that it wasn't so much about the drive. It was about the fear of asking for help, which is interesting because after the accident, all I could say was, help me, help me. I never say help me. I mean, especially since Mark transitioned, I've had to just handle things. And I sort of took it as a badge of honor, this resiliency. And it is. But when you can't be vulnerable enough to ask for help, you're living at a deficit. I was living at a deficit. And that's the gift of this experience. I realized I didn't want to burden anyone or be beholden to anyone for the entirety of my life. To really let someone look after me. And I know where it came from. When you're a little girl and you're 10 years old and your dad dies, and you see your mom trying to hold it together, you don't want to be a burden to your mom. So you hold your feelings in and you learn to be strong and not weak. I didn't want to ask for anything from that point on because I didn't want to overwhelm my mom, who was doing the best she could. I watched her, a widow at age 37 or 38 with two young girls. She had never had to really work. She didn't have an education and she had to make it happen and became fiercely independent to survive. And I looked at her and I learned that you must survive, which led me to get an education, to build a career, because I never wanted to be in her position. And so those are some good things that came from it. I got educated. I learned to build a business. I learned to be marketable and self-sufficient, and I had money that I could pay for everybody to do stuff for me. But the deficit was I didn't know how to ask anyone to do anything for me. I wonder if that goes back to the worthiness thing. And I've done a lot of work in that area and settled my self-worth. But then taking it one step further and making yourself vulnerable to someone else, that was new. So I gulped and I texted my friend Taryn and I said, hey, of course I did it in my sort of, you got an out way. Hey, I know you're working and I know you're really busy, but I have this biopsy tomorrow and I'd really love to not take an Uber. Literally within 30 seconds, she wrote back in caps. Absolutely. Don't think twice about it. I'll be there. Wow. I thought about all the times in my life where I just soldiered through and didn't dare ask. And I could have gotten perhaps that kind of response. If you look back over some of my social posts in recent weeks, I talk about asking and being vulnerable. And it's all because this is what I'm now learning. There is a new softness. See, I'm very comfortable giving. I'll give and give and give and give. But receiving, that's a whole new concept. The other thing I did after the biopsy, which was not fun, by the way, and anybody going through that, it's not fun. I said, I'm not going to sit around for the next, they said it could be 7 to 10 days for the results. I'm not going to sit around and worry. I'm going to Vegas. And I did. I mean, if I'm alive, I think I should live. Not live scared, not live protected, not live small. It's sort of like the accident sort of knocked me up the you-know-what and said, get on with living. Like Shawshank Redemption, get busy living or get busy dying. I thought I needed to get busy living because however this thing turned out, I wanted to have some fun. So I did. I went to Vegas. I made dinner reservations for myself. I went to the Pinball Hall of Fame Museum. Awesome. Played pinball for hours. Went and saw Katy Perry and one of her final concerts at her residency. And, I distracted myself beautifully. And as I was sitting by the pool, soaking up the sun, I get a ping on my phone. Your results are in. I thought, do I mess up this fun little distraction of a trip with results, not knowing what they might be? And then I thought, oh, who are you kidding? I mean, you are going to check the results, and whatever it is, you are just going to deal with it, because that's how you have to deal with anything. You just have to deal with it. So imagine how I felt, the flood of relief when all of the nodes were benign. I know I Googled just as much as anyone else that oftentimes, look, nodes on your thyroid are not uncommon. They're largely benign. But when you've been through a pretty crappy period of time, you are in fight or flight mode and you're sort of braced for the next thing. So I was sort of in this space of, I know that it's not likely that it's bad, but I've been having a bad run. So anyhow, benign, probably the most beautiful word in the dictionary for anybody who's had a biopsy. So the Brenda who's talking to you today, 10 episodes into the alchemy of pain, continues to change and evolve. She's a bit softer, a bit more vulnerable, a lot more appreciative of this gift called life, and definitely more empathetic. I haven't had a Christmas tree in over 2 years. When you're dealing with grief and loss, I remember when my dad died too, we didn't have a Christmas tree. I mean, why have a Christmas when you don't have a daddy? It's just sort of like, we were like, meh, 10 years old, done. It wasn't until my brother-in-law, Tony, came into our lives. He started dating my sister and he was all about Christmas. So it was like Santa came to town and joy came back, and having Christmas again felt like a revitalization. Like, yeah, we can get back to living. And this week, something just struck me. I'm ready to have a tree again. I'm ready to have Christmas again. Because it's not all about, as you know, the presents and the cookies and the gatherings. Christmas really is something that happens in your heart. And my heart is ready to live again and be happy again. It's a road, a journey to freedom, ultimately. We don't get to live pain-free lives, but we can live free lives. And the greatest freedom is freedom from fear. And the best antidote for that is love. So my New Year's resolution early, starting right now, is love. To not just give it, but to receive it. And now that I am willing to receive in a new way, in a vulnerable way, I wonder what beautiful things will come my way that perhaps have all been there. I just didn't have eyes to see them or the ability to let them in. I want to thank you for being a part of this podcast journey with me. Every now and then I'll give you updates on me as I continue to learn from my wonderful guests who embody finding not just the silver lining or the lesson, but the love and all that they've gone through. And I guess that would be my wish for you as we enter into a holiday season. Mr. Rogers always said his mother told him, look for the helpers. To look for the helpers, you've got to be willing to be helped. So I say to all of you, be willing and open to receive love where it comes. And I hope it comes in avalanches for you this holiday season. Thanks for listening.